The lack of education and underdevelopment due to Kutwala deepens the poverty and the cycle of poverty in society. A gender-based activist and advocate of High Court, MJ Maluleka, emphasizes the following, that honorable members, during the survival of traditions and culture and costumes, it must be part of a new nation and international identity. However, this revival must be rooted in a way that is based on human rights, democracy, equality for all, understood from the point of view of Ubuntu. Culture and tradition and costumes must have a balance within society and the legal context of the Constitution and provision of a Bill of Rights. In the same breath, we must address patriarchy in society. Patriarchy remains the deepest entrenched within the fabric of society to such an extent that most women consider it as being normal, a normal way of life. This must be changed. Steve Biko once said, I quote, "Women must be at the forefront of nation building to bring South African citizens together. Therefore, develop a whole new ethos of human coexistence. Women have shaken off the shackles of the past in a determined struggle against political, socio-economic oppression, have decisively earned themselves a place in the history books of our country. The nation honor women like Mama Winnie Mandela, Mama Sisulu, Tambo, and many others. The sad reality, however, is that today the shackles remains different from the past. The recent killings of women in the country bears testimony of the chains that bind them to find expression in patriarchal society. We need to work as a collective to address patriarchy that is in line with the following incidents that has happened in the past weeks. The hiking of trips from a job interview in Johannesburg turned to a tragedy where two young people from Mpumalanga, Carolina Mpumalanga, one was painfully killed and raped by a man, while the other one, who's disabled, was thrown out of a moving car. A 22-year-old Sebokeng Gauteng man allegedly stabbed his mother and 4-year-old sister to death. Right here in South Africa. In the University of KwaZulu-Natal, we heard about the murder of a dean of art, who was killed allegedly for refusing to approve a dissertation which did not meet the requirement. In Limpopo, we see yet another young bright lady who was in fact a breadwinner who supported a family using the NEFSA's grants monthly stipend, Precious Ramabulan, who was brutally killed. In all these incidents, as a result of patriarchy, they are happening right in our country, in our homes, our schools, our workplaces, not far from many of us where we reside. Therefore, it should not be the duty of, it should be a duty of every member here today, both on this platform, that we become vocal about this gender-based violence. These are serious matters that should not be used for cheap politicking. We should work towards strengthening our police systems. We should work towards developing policies that make sure enforce law implementation agencies to capacitate our police. 16 days of activism must not be the only time when we fight against these ills in society. We must work together to assist each other to build this nation. Honorable members, women do not wish to form a society separate from the one of men. In their belief, there is one society, and it is made up of women and children. Speaker, women share with the men folks the scars of inequalities and poverty, which are evil. Together, we can defeat poverty. Together, we can defeat unemployment. Together, we can defeat inequalities. Together, we can defeat gender-based violence. Together, we can defeat homicides. Last but not least, the matter of dealing with teaching society about respect, consent, human rights, and women must be extended to public servants. It must not be that women still feel unsafe, even in public spaces where they should feel safe. But I'll close by saying, and quoting what Mama Winnie once said, that overwhelmingly majority of women accept patriarchy unquestionably and even protected, working out of the resultant of frustration, not against men, but against themselves, in their competition for men as sons, lovers, husbands. traditionally violated wife beat out or take out their frustrations on their daughter-in-laws. So men dominate women through the agency of other women. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honorable Nchaisa.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Deputy Speaker. As we mark the 16 days of activism against violence of women and children, we must begin
Order, honorable members, order, keep your voices low, please.
for the first time to expose and name and shame these culprits. These are the culprits that have been convicted, sentenced, and charged for crimes perpetrated against women and children. The culprits in the likes of Luyanda Bota, Anonymous Mate, may the soul of this culprit rest in hell. Tulani Ngobo, Bulelani Manyaga, and many others. These culprits have got no place in our society. Deputy Speaker, we are greatly concerned that the contents of the National Register of Sex Offenders cannot be made available to the general public. It is only those who have been granted a clearance certificate that can have access to the contents of this register. This is a great concern indeed. The risk of these over-regulations may not be in the best interest of our efforts to stem out child-related sexual offenses. Honorable Deputy Speaker, we are alarmed by the Judge K. Podlani's judgment in child-related criminal cases. Her judgment in these recent years on child-related cases have been very, very lenient. This is an affront to the fight against the child abuse and violence. Deputy Speaker, as we mark the 16 days of this 16 days campaign, we need to reflect deeply on the boy child. There must be concerted effort to mold young men of ethical and moral conduct. This must be a collective effort between the government, traditional leaders, civil society, and the schools. Of course, it cannot be the government alone. Let us not destroy our future by killing our children and women. Patriarchy, Deputy Speaker, is one issue that should be looked into. No one should be seen as above one another. Deputy Speaker, unemployment, poverty, and inequality cannot be regarded as an excuse for abuse of women and children. Of course, Deputy Speaker, it is not in our culture as Black Africans to abuse women and children. Let us go back to our basics. We think, Deputy Speaker, that education, social development, police, justice, and correctional services should come together and fight against this scourge so that our children and women should no longer suffer. We support the idea that now this should be continued for 365 days, not only 16 days. This should be taken as a reminder that we should work or fight against women abuse and children. Thank you very much.
Honorable member, as you go away, please in future, no matter how angry you are, always temper your language. Especially when speaking in the House and elsewhere. It helps to cool tempers generally. Honorable Madisha, it's your turn.
Honorable Deputy Speaker, thank you very much. I too, on behalf of COPE, rise to say, let's respect women. All human beings are the same. All human beings are a product of the same process, the process which results in all human beings taking their first breath and their last breath. All human beings have the same physical and body organs, which without must make all humanity to conclude that all people, whether men or women, are the same and must therefore enjoy the same access to all that which is positive. The only difference between men and women is one organ, without which presence, more humans will not have their first breath. It is unfortunate that South Africans, including this House, only rise to commit ourselves to gender equality and the removal of gender violence when problems arise, like what has happened in Limpopo and is continuing to happen in a number of other areas. After these 16 days, government will forget until we go to elections, because although government here rises to say, respect women, it is a fact that they use women as a tool to acquire votes. Jobs for women are created, but which set of women? I want to ask that a question. Not the poor, but those who are already in high positions. If we come here to Parliament, for example, it is said that women that we have here, it must be, for example, 50%, 50%. Now, these are people who already are up there, who enjoy whatever they are enjoying. But then the ordinary people out there, the poor people, are not enjoying this. MPs are being made ministers, and that is a very serious problem. Now, even beyond the realms of this parliament, who are the women who are being enriched? Those are those women who are already there up front, who are rich already. And when they talk about giving people more resources, women more resources, it is already those who have resources that are given more resources. But then if you go to KZN, if you go to all over, the ordinary people
don't go to
have.
KZN, your time is expired.
Oh.
Your time is expired, sir.
Go.
Thank you. Honorable Nyonso.
Deputy Speaker, South Africa is an extremely violent society. Criminals opportunistically aim at the soft targets that the state should protect with all means necessary at its disposal. The soft targets are defenseless women, children, and especially the elderly. I want to illustrate this point by telling you of the case of Mama Mandisa Tsotsi. At 77, she is a retired nurse, a former placarder, a military veteran, a lawyer, a community worker, and an activist for the rights of women, a grandmother, a parent, and more than anything else, a patriot. She comes from a political family. Her father, her brother, herself were in exile. She was sexually attacked by what could be a youngster from the neighborhood in rural Tsomo in the Eastern Cape. The rural areas are no longer a safe haven for the elderly. The scourge of gender-based violence has spread throughout the country. Mama Tsotsi was raided at night and held at knife point, then assaulted. I know the case as I went to Tsomo police station in my duties as an MP serving my constituency to inquire on the investigation, and nothing has happened since then. The crime happened in August 2019, and the matter is still treated as a cold case. This is a further assault on the assaulted, done by negligent investigators. She is still to date receiving a treatment in a military hospital in Pretoria. As the PAC, we continue to hail our loud call for the judicial system to be transformed. And key among other changes is how do we decisively deal with perpetrators of these inhuman atrocities. One of the key reasons why we will continue to have this problem is when the law and judicial system is seen to be weak. Perpetrators are arrested for a few days and then later be released either on bail or through means and reasons that are never clearly explained. We call on this House to prioritize this matter, and as lawmakers, let us lead the charge in the fight against these violent crimes. Let us lead the charge by changing laws and put in place laws that will send a clearly audible message to all. that this behavior is against our African norm, morals, and value system. As African people, we praise ourselves with our high levels of moral standing on earth, and we must do everything in our power to remain as such. What type of a nation are we if we to fold our arms and watch war being waged against our loved ones? Let us rise as a society, roll our sleeves, and give the perpetrators a well-deserved response. I thank you.
Thank you. Al-Jamaa, Honorable Hendrickson.
Deputy Speaker, I need my fingers so I will be good to women. The 16 days of activism against violence on women and children, this campaign, Deputy Speaker, with the deepest respect, serves as a smokescreen for state institutions such as SABC, Social Welfare Department, and the judicial system for failing to protect women and children. In a news article of the Cape Argus this morning, the Western Cape High Court granted parole to a gang member who is serving 10 years for a gang rape committed in 2014. The Chief Justice must please explain why there is a war against women by our judiciary. With judges like that on the bench, there is no hope for the 16 days campaign. Does the Chief Justice not conscientize his judges? This is a question that Al-Jamaa asks. Al-Jamaa has started a gender strengthening mechanism desk at its National Constituency Office in Surrey State, Athlone, to assist physically abused women with legal, social, and welfare matters, and has put in place an armed response unit to fetch women as their husbands abuse them and take them to the police station. Deputy Speaker, as part of my constituency work, I chaired a disciplinary hearing at a primary school yesterday in one of the poorest areas in the Cape Flats. And I found the educator guilty and sent the minutes and the report to the Chief Auxiliary Social Worker, the Department of Basic Education, and the MJC as they inquired about this case. And this is what the evidence that the boys, 10 boys and 1 girl, gave at the hearing. My teacher tried to cut my penis with the scissors. He would hit us in our private parts with his hands and sometimes with a ruler. He's asked us to lift our arms and punish us until we are, and pinch us until we are blue. When we stretch our arms and legs apart, he proceeds to punch me in my private areas. We as parents, and the parent rights, we as parents appreciate your discretion in this matter as our son is extremely embarrassed. A grade 7 girl gave evidence the teacher hit me with his elbow against my breast, which hurt. He winks at me, hits me on my head. My classmate says he's really close with me and she is always around him. He smiled at me with weird looks, which is totally uncomfortable. He often forces me to bring things like food, else my whole class is going to squat. Deputy Speaker, we heard your press conference about this morning. We hope it's not going to be all thunder and no lightning.
Honorable Mpiti.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Jackson Katz makes a significant point on the framing of gender-based violence. He argues that calling gender-based violence a woman's issue is part of the problem because it gives men an excuse not to pay attention. Using this framing, you can see how this has systematically worked in our society. For example, when people hear the word gender, many times they think it's about women issues, as if men don't have a gender. This is one of the ways in which a dominant system maintains itself, the ability to go unexamined about issues that are about us as men. Martin Luther King once said,
In the end, what will hurt the most is not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. So today, as men in this house, we need to ask ourselves, what have we done to organize around gender-based violence? What have we done to lead other men in society on gender-based violence? The truth is, the responsibility to take up leadership on this issue must fall on adult men, and men who are in power in particular. We know so much about how to prevent domestic and sexual violence. There is no excuse that our institutions, our workplaces, our schools, and our public spaces are not doing it. The reason is adult men and adult men with power in these spaces are deliberately not taking leadership on this matter. It's about the vice chancellor in a university who has the power to decide how resources are allocated. It's about the male school teacher in a classroom who intentionally takes steps to disrupt the toxic masculinity in the classroom. It's about the father at home who sits down with his kids and unpacks the importance of being able to deal with your feelings as a young boy. It's about a coach who corrects sexist remarks in a team and sets a clear example that it will not be tolerated. The point is simple. It is about the people in charge, the people who decide what the priorities become, the people who control the resources, the adult men in their homes, the adult men in the workspaces, the adult men in the public spaces. The point is, it's about the people in charge. The president promised and made a promise here on the 5th of September to say he will provide rapid and comprehensive responses to all forms of violence. What has happened? Nothing. To address the backlog of cases, the delay in DNA testing, and the availability of rape kits, nothing. That all crimes against women and children should attract harsher minimum sentences, nothing has happened. There are a few hard truths that we need to deal with in order to start changing the course of gender-based violence. The Department of Women, Youth, and Persons with Disabilities has failed. The minister has failed. She must resign. Either we make a fundamental change and allocate the resources to the Commission of Gender of Equality so that the real work can begin on the ground. The truth of the matter is, NGOs are doing the Lord's work in the devil's playground. It is NGOs in many instances that pick up the slack of government in dealing with gender-based violence in our communities. They tend to lack funding, so do something about that. Lastly, there are men who care deeply about these issues, but caring deeply is not enough. We need more guts. We need to challenge each other. We need to disrupt each other and begin to change the level of tragedy in our society. And in closing, Speaker, there's a man here who disrespected a female colleague of mine. It's unacceptable. And you guys need to change, because if we are saying men must take up responsibility, it must start with us.
Remember, be careful of your gesturing. Honorable the Deputy Minister of Women, Youth and Persons with Disability.
Deputy Speaker, honorable members, ministers, I just want to take this opportunity really to invite all of us to reflect deeply and fairly on the memory of all those whom we have lost through gender-based violence and femicide. Sometimes it's easier to reflect on the names that have been flagged and championed all over, especially by members of the media. But we know our people have died in numbers in the most remote rural areas, and very little is known by them. But I will not risk the temptation, Honorable Deputy Speaker, to reflect a little bit on some of what Honorable Ngobo was saying, that there is a need to call for 365 days of activism. And really, really, Honorable Ngobo, when he says that, Deputy Speaker, kuyadabula, kuzisa ubuhlungu, ngoba ngempela sonke sikulendlu, kodwa cishe asizwa ngokufanayo. Ngithatha ukuthi sokuphele iminyaka emihlanu, iSouth Africa yathi asizu hlala nje kulezi insuku eziyishumi nesithupha, kodwa kufanele sikhankase izinsuku eziwu 365 days round the clock. Manje kuyethusa uma uthola honorable member engakakutholi kahle lokho esazoma phambi kweparlamente ibe kuthi cha sicela kube ne 365 days. Enye into encane nje kuyi honorable members ngisababonga abakhulumile kuyathanda futhi ukukhathaza umoya mawuzwa uHonorable Sharif ekhuluma ngokuthi uhulumende ayikho into aseyenzile. Kuba nzima ukuthola ukuthi kuyipolitika noma ukungatholi kahle izinto ukuthi imihla ngemihla senzani. The President of the Republic of South Africa led a high-level discussion in September. I will refer briefly to what Honorable Mgweba was saying. Basically, the President made a clarion call using his highest authority you can ever think of. And we have seen the response from top multinational companies in this country launching their own 16 days of activism. I personally went where Anglo-Americans said globally, worldwide, we're stamping our authority to say no violence against women and children. So, uma kukhona imember la ezingakatholi kahle ukuthi umongameli uthini usisaphi kuyethusa kakhulu ngoba phela sishaya imithetho sizinkokheli simele amaqembu okumele ngabe akhankasa ubusuku nemini phansi. So really our emphasis today ukuthi there are still men abasabambekile abasaqhubeka nalento kodwa thina kudala sibekile indaba yokuthi #women and children abusers must fall. From the time when umongameli athi ngizohosta mina summit ezokhomba indlela, that was basically the message you were sending. But also, honorable members, it's fallacy to think that the president can mobilize up to 1.6 billion and say, oh, just because it came from existing funds, it's no money. It's a budget which is meant to strengthen the machinery. And also when you talk, what is this department doing? It's part of the national gender machinery that is working 365 days. Is the Women's Ministry, is the Commission for Gender Equality, gender focal points at all levels. So e-government machinery is hard at work, dealing with a complex phenomenon. The government machinery is being led by able, capable face which is giving this process the moral and political authority. Yes, we are dealing with the complex issues. We've had shocking issues, shocking news, while we're saying at long last we are on top of the agenda. But we shouldn't be deterred nor intimidated. The president has made it clear, even when we came to address the launch of the 16 days of activism. He challenged us, as Honorable Mgweba was saying, to rethink about who we are, our own identity, African identity, and to re-examine our attitudes, our beliefs in terms of gender equality. And that's a powerful thing because it's taking this struggle beyond saying the government, but looking at us as people who make what is South Africa. Is South Africa yim nawe? Is South Africa yiqembu lami nelakho? Is South Africa umuntu wonke osemasontweni osemakhaya okuphi nakuphi? Umongameli have said masenze lokho which will make us proudly South African. Sihloniphane senze lokho okuyi constitution yethu. E-prevention is a very, very important component of the work that we are facing. The preventive measures against gender-based violence, they really have to go back to what Tata Madiba had spoken about, the RDP of the soul, the RDP of the mind, we should rethink, we should re-challenge our own attitudes towards especially girls and women, because that's where it all begins. When you think less of another person, that's where it begins to end up not realizing their rights that are protected in the victim's charter, but end up abusing them in one way or another. Also, another important thing that we have to look at, when we talk about the mechanisms that we should embark upon, it's important to locate what we're talking about within our context of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. The women that we're talking about, the girls that we're talking about, are the people who bear the brunt of the problem, but also who are far from the resources. But thanks to the government, who have seen it strategic to expand the sexual offences court to the most remote rural areas, the Minister of Justice, who have made sure that they are amended appropriately, the Tutuzela centers. We still have challenges in some instances where they are not adequately mended, but at least there's a clear thinking that those Tutuzela centers are dealing with trauma and its impact on a person's mind. And so we are not where we were yesterday. I want to assure you, honorable members, that our old victim empowerment program, almost all civil society organizations, especially those that are funded by government, are working hard day and night to make sure that from the police to the judge, nobody is gonna try and cancel victims. But this empowerment is meant to ensure that each and every victim will fight till the last for justice. Where they've disappeared, where they've been killed, what has been consoling is to see families standing up, forming foundations, and fighting back, not only for those their loved ones who have died, but for all younger women and girls who are faced with this challenge in society. Secondly, we have to continue looking at the role of the police. Of course, we all know that our police are not adequately staffed, they are not adequately funded. But there are positive things that I am happy to talk about. When we were presented that all our police stations have been given the rape kits, I felt that it's up to us, especially civil society, the community development fora, the community structures are critical if we're to prevent this scourge from occurring, because they have an opportunity to scan and analyze who are potential perpetrators, what can be done timelessly before they attack, and make sure that they prevent the act, not to react afterwards. So we are the ones who must support our police today. We are the ones who must make them accountable through our community development fora. We are the ones who must shout if we feel that our local police stations don't have adequate vehicles, they don't have measures to communicate, and whatever they might require for them to interview women in a decent manner. When it comes to prosecution, it's a major challenge when you hear that many cases have been dropped because no evidence could be accumulated. But like the police, it's up to us to support the Tutuzela centers at a local level to ensure that our files, they have all the important material which will compel the prosecuting authority to do its work timelessly, to do its work efficiently, to do its work in a way which will restore the dignity of women who would have been dehumanized through sexual assault and many of the crimes that they go through. And when it comes to our legal profession, it's also important to bring our own activism, the easiest thing is to represent the perpetrator and to create doubt in a court and to confuse the victim and to ensure that the perpetrator goes scot-free. But we are of African pride. We are South African citizens. We are all bound to fight for victims of this crime. Because as long as we don't fight adequately for them, we cannot hope that miracle will happen and perpetrators will just be intimidated. So we all have a responsibility to play our part and to ensure that anyone who is in a court of law, they don't have this burden of remembering, this burden of having a clear memory of what happened on that day, of what the perpetrator was wearing, of what the man said, did he agree, didn't agree. What has been more offensive to women is that normally in a security system, women are advised, and all citizens, that if you are confronted by armed criminals, you have to find a way of cooperating, because if you scream or you act in a way where they think you are going to attack, you'll be killed. But when it comes to women who are victims of this crime, half the time in our courts, they will be looking at whether there are scratches and then beginning to wonder as to why didn't they fight back. I mean, there are decided cases where there's been clearly an analysis whereby perpetrators were given lighter sentences. And that is a big problem. It doesn't help us to ensure that we meet our targets in terms of stopping this scourge of violence against women and children. I'm not going to go into details into those, but I would say those are some of the things which the president was talking about during the 16 days, that we have to examine our own origins and identity as to who we are and do all what will make us to be proud people. But also, we have to guard against allowing our officials within the criminal justice system all to want to be counselors and begin to channel the victim's mind, calming them down and leading to positions where sometimes they withdraw cases. The officers of the law throughout the value chain, they are meant to deal harshly with perpetrators. And I was a little bit concerned here when I heard that since the summit, nothing has happened. But I must say, if we're to be fair and truthful, there have been heavy sentences that have been passed. And also, there are many people who have not been granted a bail, as coming from a history where it was almost a routine. In the townships, in the informal settlements, we're all familiar with cases. I hope honorable members have constituencies in those communities where people were saying, yesterday, this young man raped a girl here, went to the police station, but after 2 days, we saw him back, threatening all of us. But today, I think since the implementation of this 5-action plan, there have been a clear message sent across that this is a serious crime. This is not the kind of crime where people can easily apply for bails. And we are beginning to see the fruit of the campaign. Honorable Deputy Speaker, at this point in time, I want to thank you very much for giving us an opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Honorable Minister. I appreciate that. Honorable members, that concludes the debate. The Secretary will read the second order.
Consideration of third report of National Assembly Rules Committee.
Honorable Doris Dlakute, the Deputy Chief Whip of the Majority Party, as a member of the committee, will introduce the report.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker, honorable members. Good afternoon. In accordance with the Constitution, the National Assembly is empowered to determine its own procedures in working arrangements. The rules and orders.
All right, so we come out of the National Assembly now. This is where the House has been having a debate on the 16 days of activism of November.